This is an Alberta emergency alert. Town of High River has issued a high water level alert. This alert is in effect for High River. Highwood River has caused serious flooding in High River. If you are in the affected area, evacuate immediately. Please go to Highwood High School on 12th Ave where the emergency evacuation center has been opened. For details visit www.emergencyalert.alberta.ca or stay tuned to local media.
Folks, I don't know how much most of you know.
Nothing.
We have nothing short of catastrophe here in the town of High River that we're working on.
What officials are describing as worse than the flood of the century is happening in High River. Fully half the town is underwater. People are trapped in cars. People remain trapped in their homes at this hour, and they don't know when the floodwater is going to subside or even when the river is going to crest.
Get her lifted out of here. Unbelievable. You're kidding me. No. Oh, my God.
Reports of bodies. We had a report of a canoeist who possibly fell overboard, and we do have a report yesterday as well that 2 people were washed into the Highwood River when their trailer went into the water. We do know that we located and rescued the male in that case. We are still looking for the female. We have not yet located her.
We have evacuated as much as we can, but we are hearing reports of people trapped in cars, people trapped in apartments. There's people in there's one particular person in the hospital that we're trying to get to. We have 2 helicopters from Red Deer, a private company called Mustang Helicopters, have dispatched 2 helicopters to help us. We have boats from Carsland that are coming here, and what they're doing is they're going in and getting the people and bringing them to buses, and the buses are taking them to our emergency evacuation center.
So did you say the entire community of High River is under evacuation order?
Well, 3/4 of it. Yes, it's Bob Snodgrass is now, our recreation complex has now been impacted. The cemetery, the river is coming down off 498th and coming this way from the river. So essentially, yes, we do have areas of the town that are not impacted at the moment in the south, east areas of town, but it would be better if people just got out.
Is it mandatory or voluntary?
Those areas would be voluntary. Most of the area is mandatory.
Is this worse or compared to 2005, 1995?
Someone said, and this is hearsay, so I cannot confirm this, but someone said this is worse than a 100-year flood.
Having gone through 3 of these similar situations before, I was prepared for a similar type experience with some overland flooding and damage to the community of that nature. At approximately 7 o'clock, I think it was 7:04, the council declared a state of local emergency, and even still at this point we were still under the incorrect assumption that we were dealing with what we probably can term as one of our regular floods.
We've dealt with floods before. Floods are minor to what we're dealing with right now. The floods we've had in 95 and 2005, the water comes, the water goes, we clean up, life goes on. we've got big problems in the town of High River. Basically, the town of High River is out of business right now.
Well, it's frustrating. Chomping at the bit to get back in. I mean, we have to just wait till they tell us we can go.
When you left, did you manage to get out with much?
Necessities, pretty much. That's it. And we've gone and purchased whatever we've needed, and a few things, articles of clothing and toiletries. But for the most part, we're just trying to wash every day.
Yeah. I know you got kids and everything. Are they doing okay?
Yeah, kids are good. Their grandmother came and got them, so they're with relatives now. So that's good.
Yeah, I think like most of us, you probably had lots of offers of food, clothing, place to stay.
We did, and we're grateful. And I just wish wish we could do more.
But just watching it really worried me as to what the future of this town was when you're standing up on top of the hill there and watching, 4 or 5 feet of water down here. That was wild. Like, it was nothing that. And you didn't know what was going to be left at the end of it, right? If the water was going to stop coming up, you didn't. Those are all the kind of things that I was thinking of, and what the future of High River was. And when you think that lives were lost, I was only a block or two away from here where both lives were lost in town. That's pretty aggressive that amount of water and that force of water was coming through this area. So that's the part of the day I will never ever forget. I couldn't sleep all night, and I was back and forth staying with some friends up top and back and forth to the fire hall, just talking with different people. And I was really concerned as to how are we going to get this town back up and running here. And by then the water had started to recede, and knew it wasn't going to get any worse, but never thought I'd run for mayor at that point in time, but as time progressed, it turned into that.
So the morning of June 20th, like any other community, Turner Valley was also hit with the flood. A majority of our infrastructure, water, right to the town of Black Diamond, was taken away. We lost wells. We had lines cut. We lost an abutment to a bridge. The community, in some aspects, were asked to evacuate because of the oil and gas industry. We were fortunate enough to only have 6 homes impacted in our area, and yet having to remove people because of the oil and gas people didn't understand.
By 6 o'clock, we were calling right around 6 o'clock, we were calling a local state of emergency. Evacuating, by 7 o'clock we were evacuating residents in the Northwest District, and as well as the businesses. By, shortly before noon, the water was peaking. It was it breached the Lions campground. There was the bridge was. It was the next day that the bridge was. The abutment of the bridge was no longer attached to the land. We had lost all of our communications, so we've lost our telephones, we lost our internet, we lost, we had one power pole or one hydro pole, or whatever we call them these days, that had the connection to the hospital. We'd lost our water treatment plant, we lost our wells, and we lost our businesses. That were, had been flooded in that area, so the grocery store wasn't open, the gas station couldn't open, a lot of affected people.
I thought briefly I could put a boat in and maybe row my way over to 12th and rescue some people there. But I saw how fast that water was going and how deep it was and how many hazards there were between me and 12th, and I just thought that would be suicide. So I wisely, I think, decided and or maybe cowardly, whatever, that I wasn't going to do that. The 4 of us drove to Vulcan, and where we stayed for several nights. We kept coming back here, but of course couldn't get into town like everybody else. We stayed in Vulcan. Vulcan just treated us so well. I think that's one of the they're in a lot of the ways, Nanton, Blackie, Vulcan, Okotoks, Turner Valley, Black Diamond, the towns around us. Really, the unsung heroes of this of that event.
I remember looking out my back door and there was just lines and lines and lines of these poor people standing in this scorching hot weather with nothing. And the volunteers were like handing out water and umbrellas and just trying to get people cooled down. And to be honest, I was very impressed with High River people, that how calm they were. Because I think I would have been crying on every street corner, not knowing what was going on. But they were all very calm, and everybody still had a smile on their face. And it wasn't until they came into my store when I got to realize their stories, and I got to talk to people individually, because they came in and they told me, one gentleman came in, and I remember this so clearly, because he said, I just bought a house in High River, and now it's gone. And he hadn't even moved in yet. He was supposed to move in the next day.
I don't see this store being open as a jewelry store for the next little while. I think we need to start getting some donations and get ready, because we are now going to have a flood of people, because they're going to have nowhere to go, and depending on how long this mandatory evacuation lasts, they're going to need some supplies. So we just put a post out on our Facebook page, our Serenity Facebook page, and said, you know, we'll take donations here, this is what's been happening, and I forget what all we said. And that afternoon, as soon as I posted it, we started getting calls from people in town. We started getting posts on the Facebook page saying, what do you need? How can I help? Where are you going? And the response was absolutely overwhelming. So we were able to get all of that started really before anything definitive had been started here in town, which was kind of nice.
When I got a phone call from the town CAO on the morning of the 21st, and it was, how soon can you get to town administration? I said, I'll be there in 30 minutes. By 8:30, we convened everyone, discussed whether or not we were going to declare a state of local emergency. By 9 o'clock, the decisions had all been made, and by 10:30, the evacuation center was open, turning and burning. Now, that meant I was activated as Director of Emergency Management. That's a bureaucratic job where you coordinate between the province, between the local administration, and you make things go. I very, very quickly discovered that my real job was not following a provincial plan or even my plan that I wrote for the town, but it was to coordinate the dozens and then the hundreds of people who said, how can I help? And get the hell out of their way.
So yeah, it was a horrid situation, but I think by and large everybody grew from it. Everybody came closer. Everybody behaved magnificently. In the lineups we had here, we moved the elderly and the sick to the front of the line. Never once was there an objection from somebody standing and baking in the sun. They got water. We had spritzer fights with water bottles to cool people down. Even tried for a wet t-shirt contest, but that wouldn't work. Yes, it was fun in the midst of adversity, but it brought out the goodness in people, and that's what I remember most about this, the goodness in people.
Watching the water around the church, and it started gradually coming in, I picked up the computers and some water and some granola bars I had around, and all the prayer shawls I could find to use if I needed something to keep me warm, and headed up to wait out the flood up on the ledge. And so it was probably about noon when I went up there, and got up and then realized that I needed to pull the ladder up with me, because not knowing how high the water would get, if it got too high it would sweep away and then I'd be stuck up on the ledge. And so I found an extension cord and hooked it around the ladder and pulled the ladder up with me. I credit my scouting background to thinking about that. I think the eeriest part was listening to all the furniture start falling over and collapsing through the night. But I had made myself sort of the goal that I wouldn't leave the church until the water was down till ankle depth, because I could just see. I used the ladder, I could climb up, and there's side windows, and I could see out the side windows to see exactly how high the water was outside, and I could see a big whirlpool between us and the post office. And I knew that it was safer inside than outside at that point. Unfortunately, I had no cell phone service to talk to anybody. Although it was fortunate in that I didn't know what was happening in the rest of the town. I think I thought my family was home watching a movie, having popcorn, waiting for me to get back the next morning. It just looked like bombs had gone off with all the windows blown out, and so I sort of judged which way was safest to go. I headed down toward the funeral home, and it wasn't very long before I was out of water going that way, and found someone driving by, Bryce from the hospital, who stopped and picked me up and took me to my side of town, and that's when started realizing how extensive this was. And got back to my house and then got out to Nanton and found my family, and that was the hardest part, was when I suddenly didn't know where my family was.
June 20th was our wedding day, and we were celebrating our 54th wedding anniversary. The water actually started receding somewhere between 4 and 5 o'clock, so we decided to just suck ourselves in for the evening and made ourselves an anniversary dinner, had a glass of wine. Actually, we set out back here in the sunshine between 4 and 5 with a glass of wine. It was very nice and warm and hot, but the water was very fast flowing down the ditches behind us and through the yard. As I said, the water receded conceivably about a foot by 7 o'clock, and we thought everything was going to be fine, so we were planning to stay. But a large front-end loader, probably from the feedlots, came along about 9 o'clock, and they drove right up to our front door and insisted we had to go. The bucket was able to hold about 12, 14 people, I think, all told. They took up 2 other people on our block and a couple across the road. But we sat for almost an hour and a half in the bucket waiting for a big rock truck to come down Highwood Trail to pick us up.
My wife had phoned me and said, "You need to get home from Okotoks because it's pretty bad here." And I thought, well, how bad can it be? It's the same as every other spring. But when I got back to town and the chaos that was going on, and the police and emergency vehicles were out, and they were trying to direct traffic as best they could, and they honestly, I don't think, knew where to send anybody. It blew my mind. Yeah, thinking that it was coming our way, and then to see it actually slowly coming down the street when we left. It was just in the gutters at that point, but just knowing it was that close, it was pretty scary.
My wife had a real rough night that first night because she'd left her cat behind in the house. So we were coming back into town and helping people doing different things, and at one point we were over here in the neighborhood, and I thought to myself, you know, I'm going to get that cat for her. So I came into the house and found the cat and stuffed it in a suitcase and zippered it all up, and off I head out to where she was over helping by Eagleview. I handed her a suitcase with a cat in it. Well, I was a hero, and I still am, I guess, in some ways, but she got her cat. And then later that day I was telling the story to Daniel Smith, and Daniel said, well, what about all the other animals? And I said, I don't think we have a plan in place for animals. And so she said, well, we should send a message out and let people know that if they need their animals rescued, we can do it. And of course, Danielle wasn't too keen on giving out her personal cell number, so I said, well, use my cell. So she put my cell out on a tweeter or Twitter, whatever you call it, and it was in minutes. My phone started to vibrate, tweet, and make all kinds of noises, and it didn't quit for probably about 3 days. That over 1,800 animals were eventually rescued out of the town. And it was, most of them came in via my cell phone request for help.
Thanks. And I was at the Snodgrass Recreation Center sandbagging when they needed to bring a pallet over to the hospital. So I came over with that pallet, and we were just piling up 3-4 sandbags high all the way around the facility to make sure that water didn't get in. By about 12:15, we were trapped inside, and we were watching the water continuing to rise, wondering if the sandbags were going to hold. The problem here at the hospital was that the landing pad for the helicopter was at ground level and covered in water. So there were 125 patients that were in there who would have needed to have been evacuated with no way to evacuate them. The helicopter tried to land on the roof a couple of times, and they realized it didn't have the structural integrity to be able to do that. So what ultimately ended up happening is, and I've talked to some nurses, they, I think, pulled a 40-hour shift over the course of 2 days, taking care of patients until they could be safely evacuated.
There's so many stories to highlight, but I think
think probably the one I would highlight the most, and it's probably bigger than one person, but it's around particularly one person who, we're worried about, did our car get hit or whatever, because there's quite a few of us that didn't actually live in town, so we knew that our homes were fine. So we're concerned about our car. And yet these people could see that the water had demolished their house. And they very quietly kept going about their work, so I think those are the heroes that, despite knowing that their world had changed, that they stayed focused on what needed to happen that day. And not just that day, they stayed true to heart for the next few months while we got services back on track, and on to now, right? Where they're still trying to rebuild what is their safety, their home, right? So those are the heroes, and I'm sure those are some stories that you hear across the community, but those are the people that I would highlight.
I came to work and everything seemed okay, didn't get no phone calls or whatever, so it was about 9 o'clock, I think, roughly, that time, and I get this phone call, and it was from the fire chief, and it said, "Joyce, you need to get everybody out. You have 1 hour, exactly 1 hour. If you take longer than 1 hour, they're going to be trapped." I'm thinking, oh. And I think my first thing was to say to him, "Are you going to provide some transportation? Are you going to help me?" And the answer back was, "No, I am sorry. There is no way that I can help you. You're on your own." That actually was like a lump in my stomach, and I'm thinking, oh my God, now what? Basically what we had the bus from Okotoks, which was probably going to take 15 minutes probably to get here, and then we had our bus, which is what?
20 passengers.
20 passengers, the recreation bus that we had.
And
so,
7-passenger minivan.
Yeah. And so basically that's what I'm thinking, okay, that's all I've got, and I have, just at the top of my head, Spitzy House, Soderberg, and my residents, not counting volunteers or anything else, roughly 200 people to evacuate. So, within 1 hour, we had everybody out. Actually, it took 1 hour and I think 7 minutes, but we had everybody out. And I tell you, I cannot thank the community and the people along here, especially along here, that just came. It was like a circular motion. They would drive up, because we have a circular area at the front of the lodge. They would drive up, and this is the funny moment. We were normally going to take a resident out. We would want to make sure that, okay, that resident, the truck's not too high for them to get into, or it's they got enough leg room. We got to make sure they get in the front or whatever. That day, if you could walk and you could breathe, we don't care. We hoist you up, we got you in, because someone will be on the other end at the school.
At the Highwood High
At
School.
the Highwood School. That will take care of you at that end. I wasn't worried about that end. I was worried about this end of getting them out, because by this time the water was coming down that 9th Street here, and it was starting to come pretty fast.
It became very stressful that morning when we heard we lost a loss of life, or a potential loss of life that morning. For myself, take a breath. I guess it was overwhelming to know we were not successful in saving everybody. That's our core response is to rescue people, and when we're unable to do it, it certainly raised a lot of concerns in my mind, and hoping that we didn't lose more. That was first and foremost, is the rescuing of people and making sure they were safe.
One of the hardest things we dealt with that day was with kids. There was so many calls for this woman at home with her kids, and I had a 2-month-old baby at home at the time, and that hit me harder than anything, I think. And just dealing with them as they came in. Like, there are a lot of people that didn't speak English, so we had to try and comfort and try to calm down, and it was just very hard. Just seeing the stuff that day, seeing decks float off of houses floating down the street, and dumpsters, and there was a half-ton truck with 2 people in it that was floating down towards the creek there, and we managed to get them out of there and into the boat just before their truck went underwater. So same thing. They didn't want to get out. They didn't want to leave their truck and the stuff in it, but we basically had to drag them out of there and got them out. And they were quite thankful after they realized what was going on. But just a tough day all in all to see. Being on the fire department, you see all sorts of stuff. You just never prepared for something like that. So
boats would come in, we'd grab them, pull them until it drug on the bottom, and then unload, push the boats back off. We'd land the helicopters, unload those, and then I had one lady, it was the funniest thing. The boat comes in, I put out my hand, I help her out, and she gives me this look, and then she looks to the west, looks to me, looks to the west. She's like, "Did you get flown over here?" I'm like, "What?" I'm like, "No, my twin brother must be over there." So I didn't know this at the time, but my twin brother on the High River Fire Department was on the west side loading people, and I was on the east side unloading them.
I'm a fisherman, I'm a fly fisherman, I'm a conservationist, make no bones about it. I've written about conservation, I've written about natural areas, natural, wildlife, and one thing that really stands out to me from all this is that the river is a living entity. The river decides what the river wants to do.